This woman has worked for a living as a torch. She set fire to houses in order to collect insurance money. She says there are at least 20 more like her working in Detroit today.
There are many ways to set a fire, and to use a fluid. You'd have to use a fluid that's flammable but not detectable. Grease fires, cigarette fires, careless smoking as they call it. Grease fires burn longer than a fluid. A fluid will only burn to the portion what you have saturated with the fluid. And you could have a fire from the stove, and you can have a chain reaction. A throw rug on the floor, dish towel. The dish towel can be hanging near the stove. There has been times that it has been sprayed with fluid like, there is a fluid that does burn, like roach and ant spray. It's flammable. Cigarette lighter fluid is flammable. All these things, but basically they cannot tell because these items burn totally up, but they only start the fire.
Fire trucks answer an average 164 calls a day in Detroit. 110 of them are actual fires. At least a third, most say half of those fires, are thought to be arson. Many, many more legitimate fires become statistics in a complicated fire repair racket. All in all, the unnecessary losses may total $15 to $20 million a year in Detroit alone. $50 million in Michigan. Detroit is the fire fraud capital. Many say dirty money from fires is second only to dirty drug money here. But fire frauds are growing daily in other cities and states across the country. Yearly losses nationally may total $40 billion. Insurance companies pay the bill. But homeowners in Detroit, as well as those across the state and country, pick up the final tab, filtered through higher and higher insurance premiums. A white fire chaser who was on the streets for many years says that the classic fire chasing racket began 25 years ago, when small black contractors couldn't get business from predominantly white insurance companies. They competed by going directly to the homeowner on the spot at the scene of the fire. Before long, the streets were flooded with fire solicitors, white and black, many of whom turned contractor when they saw how good the money was beyond their commissions. The object of a fire chaser is to persuade the homeowner to sign a contract for repairs to the house in return for the total insurance settlement. The homeowner knows little of the transaction after that. The fire chaser takes the signed agreement to a contractor he knows has the right connections. An inflated claim, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 under the total insured value of the house, is agreed upon by the solicitor, the contractor, and the public adjuster. The public adjuster is licensed by the State Insurance Bureau to negotiate claims on behalf of homeowners between a contractor and the insurance company. But many times, he is part of the fraud. The claim is submitted to the insurance company, where it's expected that the company adjuster will knock off a few $1,000s to make it appear he's doing his job. When the claim is settled, here's how the money is divided. The fire chaser takes 15% of the final structural damage settlement. The public adjuster, 10%. And many times the insurance company adjuster, another 10%. And that doesn't begin to account for the profit above and beyond all reason, which many contractors expect. Sanford Zack, who before his conviction and probation in 1976 was believed to be the biggest fire repair contractor in the area, reportedly would not look at a contract unless his own profit, after all the payoffs, was at least $5,000. According to Street Talk, Zack boasted he could spend $1,000 a day for the rest of his life. And that, of course, still doesn't include the arson payoffs, which may be a 10% kickback to the homeowner for allowing the house to be burned, and at least 10% to the torch for doing the job. Fire chasers in Detroit are readily identified. They drive Mark IVs and Cadillacs, much like kingpin drug pushers. They sometimes get to a fire before the fire trucks, because many of the larger contractors have elaborate radio systems by which they monitor fire calls in a central location, then relay to the cars by a special changing code information about the fire.
They might say, I think I'll go to Florida. That means it's a good job. It's a top dollar job. They might say, I've signed my contract with the YMCA and I'm going to take my whole family. That means that there's no need for you to go there. It's been signed by somebody. Just wasting your time to go there. If they say that the job is really a hot dog job, that means it's not worth going. If they say it's a Carl Chop House, that means it's a good job.
If it's a good job, they offer the homeowner cash, drugs, booze, women, anything necessary to persuade him to sign with them.
It's all supplied by the contractor if he's a fire chaser for a contractor. Everything he needs is supplied. The money, the alcohol, the drugs, the woman, a place to stay that night or the next week, or food or clothing immediately. Whatever his need is, a real contractor who's been out there, who's really working at it full blast, has all these things available to his fire chaser, because he don't want his fire chaser to come short of making what he needs to make that deal.
Even when arson or inflated insurance claims are not a proven part of the picture, the person whose house burns accidentally can become a victim of an unscrupulous fire chaser or a shoddy fire repair contract.
At home, it was from 10 to 15 cars out, Lincoln, Cadillacs, and these mobile homes. And a couple of those was out there with the loud music going. They was playing music, and you know, and each one was coming in before I could get in to see the damage. They had already been through my home. And they asked me to, different ones asked me to sign. And I told them that I wasn't ready to sign, because first I wanted to call someone that, you know, that I figured could tell me more about what to do, because I was upset. And they would come in and say that this company wasn't licensed, and they would take your stuff out of your home, and they wouldn't do the work properly, and you know, all these different things. So I finally I told them I had someone, and he couldn't get here before 1:30. So they all waited. They stood around and waited and played the music, and till this man come out.
Elise Goins finally signed a repair contract. 7 months after the fire, the repair work hadn't been completed, although the contractor had received the insurance check. When Mrs. Goins moved back into her house, she reported kitchen utensils, linen, stereo equipment, and a camera missing. Hattie Ledbetter had a fire one stormy evening in the spring of 1975.
Which I still was nervous and still was crying. Then this gentleman, he walked up to me and he asked me, he said, you know, he told me don't get myself together. He wanted to talk to me.
The man was a Detroit fire repair contractor. He persuaded Mrs. Ledbetter to let him board up her house, returned a few days later, took her to dinner, and loaned her $300. She signed for repairs. Some months later, the poor workmanship showed. Mrs. Ledbetter has a complaint unresolved at the consumer section of the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, and an estimate of $945 from a second contractor to repair her cracked walls properly. Mrs. Ledbetter and Mrs. Goins are classic examples of the fire repair racket at work on the accidental or legitimate fire. After all the commissions are taken out of the insurance settlement for structural damage, there is seldom enough left for adequate repairs. But the accidental fire is today only a small portion of the fire racket. Programmed or arranged fires make up the bulk of unnecessary losses.
A fire is arranged several ways. You may be contacted by a mortgage collection agent, who in turn let a contractor know which house is in foreclosure or about to be foreclosed, or you may have direct contact with someone who is out seeking for people who are in distress, or for someone who might need additional money for any number of reasons, or they might want some work done on the home that they cannot afford, or an improvement on the home that they can't afford, so they can get it done by having a fire.
But it isn't always the person who is down and out who decides to burn his or her own house. In many areas of Detroit in particular, declining real estate values have made it seem economically foolish not to burn it. This house, for example, was purchased almost new in 1965 for $18,000. In 1976, the house was insured for what was deemed 80% of its replacement value, or $37,000. The owner wanted to sell the house. The sale price, $25,000. If he quietly arranges a fire to totally burn the house down, he can collect $37,000 for the structure based on the current insurance policy. He will probably save $2,000 in real estate commissions and fees. He can collect half of the insurance policy value, or $18,500, for contents in the house. If the garage burns down with the house, he gets another $4,000. It happens that Lieutenant Marvin Monroe, a Detroit Fire Department arson investigator, lives here. He and his longtime partner, Lieutenant Bob McClary, detected patterns in their routine arson investigations in 1972.
And we investigated a number of fires, and we saw like fires, a number of them, and like overheated furnace, the same fire in the closet or in the attic. And they started not necessarily baffling us, but we thought, hey, there's something wrong here. Too many fires are happening in bathrooms, too many fires are happening in closets, in attics, overheated furnace. So we start watching those fires very closely, what time they come in, how do they come in, who the necessarily cast of characters involved, starting with the homeowner, what type of home, what type of income, what type of neighborhoods, where, whatever. And we start building paper on it, files after files.
Since 1973, Monroe and McClary have been assigned off and on to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Organized Crime Task Force to investigate the arson racket. The task force's record is notable. They have issued indictments charging 40 homeowners, 30 arsonists, 8 contractors, 3 office personnel, 4 licensed salesmen, 7 programmers, 2 realty investors, 32 supermarket or bar owners, and 1 insurance adjuster, with crimes relating to the complex fire fraud. About a quarter of those arrested were found or pleaded guilty. Another quarter had their cases dismissed, usually to turn state's evidence. Just under half have cases pending. 4 of those accused were acquitted in jury trials, and another 4 were never apprehended. But as Jim Mitchell, who was the assistant county prosecutor assigned to the task force during the indictments, laments, miles of legwork has changed little on the streets.
In a paper sense, we made progress in terms of a large number of arrests, trials, convictions, but in a real sense, reducing the incidence of arson in the city of Detroit, no, we did not make much progress at all. We learned a lot of information. One of the major reasons, no doubt, is the fact that most of those convicted of arson, fire repair contractors, chasers, homeowners, were not sent to jail.
A garage fire on Detroit's northwest side late last summer attracted 4 fire chasers known to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. 2 of them have been charged with fire frauds and pleaded guilty, but were not sent to jail. Truman Davis was arrested December 13, 1973, on a charge of arson, the burning of dwellings. On March 24, 1975, he was sentenced to 2 years probation after pleading guilty to a lesser charge of attempting to burn a dwelling and agreeing to turn state's evidence. Jimmy Johnson pleaded guilty August 4, 1975, to conspiring to burn a dwelling and received a suspended sentence. While he was out on bond awaiting trial, His name was on a contract which the Consumer Office investigated and gained a $40,000 negotiated settlement for the homeowner. No matter how much or how little the law does, in the end, we are all victims of the massive fire fraud. This is the Insurance Services Office of Michigan. Through a computer in their national headquarters, said to be second in size only to the Pentagon's, this office files insurance claim records from 90% of the companies doing business in Michigan. The computer then projects the premium rates needed to compensate for claims paid out. Requests for rate increases are filed in Lansing on behalf of all the companies. The higher the claims, of course, the higher the rates. Joe Rutter is the manager of the Michigan office.
Accidental claims. We have had rate increases, of course, and arson undoubtedly contributes to those rate increases because arson contributes to losses.
But how much, we don't know. The giant computer doesn't evaluate how much arson or unnecessary losses contribute to overall losses. So all we know is that homeowners' insurance premiums in Michigan, based on total projected losses, went up 8% in 1968, 11.5% in 1970, more than 6% in 1972, almost 10% in 1975, and 7.5% in 1976. More graphically, look again at Marvin Monroe's house. His premium in 1965 was $96 for 3 years, or $32 annually. In 1976, the premium was $206 annually. Of course, inflation played a part, but not enough for a 500% increase in 11 years. You would think that the fire racket and its dollar payoffs by the insurance companies, spreading literally like wildfire to other cities and states, would be a #1 concern and priority of the insurance industry. But there are many who say that it takes money to make money, and the more the cash flow, the more the end figure. Because the rate system by law allows insurance companies to match their losses with higher premiums from policyholders, perhaps insurance companies are turning their heads. The Organized Crime Task Force has taken it a step further, however. They believe the fraud and its profit have spread to the insurance companies themselves.
The insurance companies' policies and procedures generally have fostered and assisted this entire criminal enterprise. There's no question about that. As far as actually individuals criminally involved, our investigation reveals that there are large numbers of individuals criminally involved at the very lowest levels, particularly the staff adjusters or independent adjusters representing the insurance companies. That level, obviously, since over the years some of these individuals at the lowest level get promoted up through the company, our suspicion is that maybe it goes above the lower levels, but I really can't say that with any certainty.
A contractor normally uses the same adjuster, and that same adjuster has familiarized himself with many insurance companies, and there's money paid on the table to the adjuster and to the insurance adjuster that they extract a happy medium.
Andy Olson, manager of the Metropolitan Detroit Loss Bureau, a small staff set up by insurance companies to monitor claims and adjusters, sees the problem clearly.
Yes, it would be very easy if there's a combination of adjuster and or supervisor who is allowing claim payments to be excessive and possibly splitting some monetary gain with the public adjuster, with the fire repair contractor, or with the homeowner.
We asked Olson about payoffs to insurance claims people, which we heard had progressed to standard weekly payments instead of just percentages of certain claims.
I've heard similar things to that. I don't know if I could lend anything of value to that. I do not know. But I wouldn't be surprised.
Our informant told us one of the easiest insurance companies to work with was Michigan Basic Property Pool, which insures 50% of Detroit dwellings. We went to Noel Cott, claims supervisor at Michigan Basic.
There have been some people in the past at Michigan Basic who have been perhaps overly cooperative in some situations, yes.
Had Cott seen the insurance fraud firsthand?
Yes, as an adjuster for the companies, I had been approached in some situations.
Did he ever make any money from the fire racket?
No.
But despite first-hand knowledge of the fraud inside insurance companies as seen by present employees and task force convictions, insurance industry spokesmen like Lee Matthews keep an optimistic outlook.
Yes, the issue of some adjuster involvement, company adjuster involvement, has been raised, as I think you know, in the investigations of the Wayne County Organized Crime Task Force. Wherever this has occurred, there has been a working liaison between the task force and the involved company. Among those that we know anything about, there has been very prompt and forceful action. This is something companies simply do not want to tolerate.
The fire fraud racket is now at epidemic proportions, with arson up 100% since 1974. The task force has information indicating that some Detroit fire repair contractors have branched out to other cities in Michigan, as well as to Atlanta and San Francisco. Insurance spokesmen agree the arson for profit scheme is a national problem, citing insurance industry attention to it in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. In Detroit, the racket has matured to specialized types of arson, like a string of 75 fires in independently owned supermarkets in 1975. So what is the answer? Many, particularly on the Organized Crime Task Force, think the answer lies in legislation drafted for the Michigan State Legislature. The law, proposed by Representative Gil Dinello of East Detroit, would do two things. First, it would take the profit out of the scheme by limiting the face value of homeowner insurance policies. Presently, houses are insured for at least 80% of what is referred to as a replacement value, or what it would cost to replace the structure as it stands. The option is to insure the house for its fair market value, or what could be gained by selling it on the open market. The law suggests that property be insured for its fair market value plus 10% to pay for raising the structure if it is a total loss. Theoretically, the excessive gains of burning compared to selling would be eliminated. A second part of the proposed legislation would eliminate the street action of the fire racket by requiring the insurance company to have a more direct responsibility for repairs. The fire chasers' unorthodox persuasion tactics now used on homeowners would become meaningless, with the stipulation that the insurance company inspect damage within 96 hours of a fire, publish a notice for bids from contractors, and select the lowest bid to do the job.
We're convinced that because that great money motive, that incentive to burn, is so real and so financially rewarding to the arsonist, that unless we do something about that incentive to burn, there are going to be fires regardless of how often and how vigorously we investigate from a law enforcement point of view. We need the legislation to take the profit out of it.
This man is a lobbyist for the Michigan Insurance Association. He says he'll support legislation designed to attack the fire insurance racket in Michigan.
The proposed legislation that Representative Dinello and I believe Speaker Emeritus Ryan are working on is something that will help the basic policy-paying public in the state of Michigan. Anything that comes along with a moral issue of the insurance companies would support. And the only problem would be technicalities as to the implementation. They have problems on the cost factors. If it costs too much to implement that, or if it costs too much to the policyholder, then I think some changes would have to be made. But anything along the lines of a moral issue, they'd certainly go along with that.
No doubt the legislation will have a good many amendments before it comes up for a final vote. In the meantime, the fire trucks continue to roll. The abandoned, burned-out buildings continue to blight once vital neighborhoods. Excessive claims continually are fed into insurance computers, and higher premium rates are quoted from your local insurance agent.